to lesson number 3 of decoding the Talmud. I'm glad that so many of you are back with us. That means I didn't completely lose you. It was not easy to follow the past 2 weeks because we were talking about ideas that are not ideas that people are familiar with. So thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about the Gemara. Last week, we spoke about the Mishnah. Let me share the screen with you so we could have some visuals and I could remind everyone what we spoke about last week. So lesson number 3, decrypting the Mishnah, how the sages studied, debated, and understood the Mishnah. A quick recap. Last week, for those who are paying attention, last week we spoke about the Mishnah, and we explained that there's something called the oral tradition. It's not allowed to be written down for 1,300 years. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote it down because he was afraid we were going to lose it. And then this week we're going to talk about the Gemara. The Gemara is the commentary that analyzes the Mishnah. The Mishnah and the Gemara together make up what's called the Talmud. The Gemara was written by a group of sages called the Amoraim. You kind of need to know who the Amoraim were and what an Amora, singular, is in order to move forward. So open up to page 77, key term 3.1, and you could see the word for yourself. Say it to yourself audibly so that you're comfortable with the word Amora or Amoraim. Can you say that? Amora or Amoraim. And an Amora is the sages whose teachings are recorded in the Talmud. When did this Talmud or this Gemara, when was it written? It was written over 3 centuries. At the end of the 2nd century CE, all the way to the end of the 5th century CE. And what is it? It's an interpretation of the Mishnah. And how do we interpret the Mishnah? Through questions and answers, as you're going to see today. All right. So to recap, last week, we spoke about how the Mishnah was written down to organize the oral Torah. And we said that it was written very concisely. And sometimes 2 laws are found in 1 sentence. And every word that's written is written with measure, almost like the way we study the Torah. Now, the problem with that is, after all the persecution and all the Jewish people were exiled around the world, right? Fill in the blanks, you know what happened throughout history. There's a lot of questions on every single Mishnah. In fact, when you read a Mishnah, you end up with more questions than with answers. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you to actually read a Mishnah, and let's see what kind of questions we have. So we're going to illustrate this by reading the Mishnah we read last week. Now, it might seem familiar to you, but don't worry. The more you could read this, the better you'll understand it. So we're actually going to read it quite a few times. I am going to read this, and you can follow along, page 78. One must refrain from eating on the eve of Passover from close to the time for the reciting of the Mincha prayers until after darkness has fallen. Okay, this is the rule. You're getting ready for Passover. You're hungry. I want a snack. I want a coffee and a macaroon. But the Mishnah says no. From the time of Mincha all the way until the darkness has fallen, well, really means all the way until the Seder, you can't eat anything. All right, next. Even the most destitute person in the Jewish nation should not eat unless he is reclining. Right? Number 3, he should not he should not be provided with less than 4 cups of wine